Good. We'll go ahead and get started. Resume recording here. Welcome to the first CXMP of the year. We haven't done the M&A session since 2023. So
Wow.
yeah, this one it's a bit of a niche topic, but Seth, I know you're certainly in the M&A world these days. Um,
Yep.
but Caitlin, how about you? Is Beach Fleischman doing any acquisitions?
Not really. We've done a couple in the past five-ish years, just a couple of smaller places, but nothing right now.
Okay. Well, Jennifer, how about you? Is HP doing anything on the acquisition front?
No, no,
Nope. M- Marnie, do you have any irons and any fires anywhere with any clients doing mergers or acquisitions?
Not directly with clients, but I am observing the company I most recently worked for 9 years just got purchased.
Hmm.
So, as the former global CX lead, I'm watching from the outside in.
Uh-huh. Great, great.
I'm wishing them a lot of luck.
Yeah, yeah. First time I've been able to lead this workshop since getting acquired myself, so I certainly have a different perspective on it. Um, yeah. So, uh, it's kind of interesting. We have two back-to-back CXMPs that are broad encapsulations of the full CX spectrum, but targeted towards a specific use case. So our last session, I think, was CX in the recruiting process, right? So we kind of did a lot of different CX things just in the context of recruiting. So here we're going to do another kind of broad survey where a lot of different CX tools will come into play, but we're going to do that in the context of an acquisition. So strap in and we'll go. This is one of the ones where I do have slides. So the first portion today, I'm going to run through a slide deck. You guys know me, this should be a discussion, not a presentation. So let's talk our way through this. And after going through the deck, I do have an exercise for us to build the value map. It's kind of like a journey map, kind of like an empathy map, kind of I hybridized a couple of tools for the specific use case of an acquisition. So we'll work through that. Um, so purpose and learning learning objectives, and I'm going to go on mute every now and then and cough. Uh, define client experience and employee experience. We can probably skip that with this group. Apply the tools of CX and EX to create and capture value, and then avoid common value leaks when buying or selling a firm. I'm going to talk about that pretty early on in the process here. So fundamentally, client experience is all about creating and capturing value, right? Like if we really distill, like why do we do feedback? Why do we map journeys? Why do we do all those things? It's so we can find better ways to create value. Sometimes that value is emotional. We're just creating delight. But delight leads to repurchase, it leads to referrals, it leads to all kinds of other stuff that ultimately trickles down to value to the business, right? So CX is all about creating and then ideally capturing the value. So when we think about that through the lens of an acquisition, how do we use CX and, by extension EX to create and capture value in an acquisition? So we want to think through the stakeholders, and we're going to talk a lot about these five stakeholder groups. You think about the seller, the shareholders. They're trying to create future value, right? I'm growing my firm. I'm trying to optimize it so that one day I can sell. Every business owner buys a business or founds a business in order to eventually sell the business, right? You've got to get your capital back out for retirement. So the seller view is building a more valuable business for an eventual acquisition. The buyer's view is about capturing future value. I'm buying a business that's already created value, but I'm doing that because I believe I can capture future value down the road. I'm giving up capital today for more capital tomorrow. Employees keep me and my family safe. The clients keep it easy and good. I certainly know I've got a couple of clients on the call here, and I don't think either of you three expressed any anxiety around the acquisition by Clearly Rated, but I've certainly had some clients share some concern that, we chose to do business with you, not them, and now you're them. So what's going to go wrong, right? And you think about, particularly in AEC, you got to think about your trade partners, your industry partners, because they're impacted by an acquisition as well. So Seth, when WK Dixon got acquired, all of a sudden we had a logo of a much larger firm on our client list, right? That's a appealing thing. We've got a bigger logo we can put on our web page and proposals and things like that. But also there's risk. What if the new owners don't continue to fund it? What if those things kind of happen? So all of your partners, your vendors, your subs, there's a whole piece there. Am I missing any key stakeholder groups when going through a merger acquisition? Do those value goals seem aligned? So here's what's fascinating. The buyer of a $10 million firm loses $5 million in value. You're buying a $10 million firm, it could be worth $15 million if you could find and eliminate all the sources of value leakage. As a seller, you could sell your business for 15 million instead of 10 million if you could create confidence with the buyer that you have a plan to avoid all that value leakage. Uh, the Harvard Business Review reports that 80% of acquisitions fail to achieve the forecast financial results. So acquisitions far more often than not fail to realize the expected financial outcomes. And so buyers know that. And so it's priced into the price that they pay. Buyers are buying at a discount, sellers are selling at a discount because we all know there's value leakage. And so that sets the market. So what does failure look like? So from the seller's view, undervalued equity. I've talked to so many leaders that in the industry that, you know, they're now in their 60s and they hear all this stuff about acquisitions, they get excited, and then they're confronted with the offer that's, half or a third of what they thought their business was worth. You get a sense of losing your legacy. I mean, I certainly feel that a little bit having sold Client Savvy to Clearly Rated. I've got a brand, I've got a personal brand, there's this thing I built, and all of a sudden it's not mine anymore, right? So there's some emotional stuff in here. It's not fun anymore. You haven't had a boss in a long time, and all of a sudden you know, I'm not there yet. I'm actually having more fun than I've had in a long time because I'm doing all the stuff I love and none of the stuff I loathe. But I think I'm more the exception than the rule. And there's a lot of, leaders who were, one step away from the C-suite, and now they're three steps away from the C-suite. And a lot of acquisitions have some kind of a delayed performance payout. So oftentimes a substantial part of the exit is based on continued performance. And if that doesn't materialize, the seller loses those incentives. From the buyer's view, failure looks like overpaying, poor execution, challenges with capacity versus bandwidth, realizing you have a poor strategic fit, realizing you have a clash of cultures. The buyer often ends up with a poor focus on human capital because the two teams aren't merging. Inadequate communication, inadequate due diligence, and failure to assess client satisfaction. PSMJ did a study several years ago, and that $10 million firm, not measuring satisfaction before buying, they calculated cost over $250,000 in equity just on that alone. So where does failure come from? The root cause of all of this failure is we're not helping all the stakeholders complete the journey. It comes from some research published by the Harvard Business Review. The customer churn increases 60% after an acquisition. We're not helping all of our stakeholders make the journey from today to tomorrow. We don't understand or design the critical journeys for our stakeholders. So what ends up happening is, some bank people and money people and, senior shareholders all scheme to make a deal happen, and they end up doing something to all the stakeholders, right? For better or worse, Jennifer, I did something to you when I sold Client Savvy, right? I changed something in your world.
Yes, you did.
I did. So, if we don't understand that, if we don't design that journey for our stakeholders, then they can bounce. One of my favorite stories in this, I mean, it doesn't really have a happy ending, but it really tells the point well. A client of ours, 200 person mid-size engineering firm, got acquired by one of the top 10, behemoths. Within 45 days, a third of the employees had an office across the street and founded a competing consulting firm. So not only did the buyer of the firm lose a third of their employees, but they inherited a new competitor. And guess how much of that work walked across the street with those employees? It was more than a third. So do you think that's an acquisition that went well? And that's so common. That happens more often than not. Seth, has anyone broken off of WK Dixon in the last 2 years and founded a new consultancy yet?
No, not so far.
Well, one of the lucky ones so far.
Yep.
So, where's this all coming from? Wall Street Journal did research. They found customer churn is the top cause for half of integration failures. Gallup, customer churn increases 60% after an acquisition. McKinsey, 5% of customers churn immediately after an acquisition. When you look at, the client lifetime value of a client churning, have all of you been through the client lifetime value workshop yet? No. A client lifetime value, you look at annual revenue from the client, you look at net margin, you look at what your average churn rate is across your business, you look at a discount rate for future money. Like if you win the lottery, you get $100 million, but if you want it all up front, you get what, 45? So you're buying future money at a discount today, right? So a client lifetime value looks the same way. If a client's giving you $1 million a year in revenue 10 years from now doesn't have $1 million in value. It's discounted by some degree, right? So there's actuarial rates for all that. But roughly speaking, in this industry, a client is worth 5 to 7 times their annual profit. If you could sell a client for 10 times your annual profit with them to a competitor, you should take the money. Okay, it's a way of like thinking about valuing clients like an asset. So when you really look at, the impact of churn, it's not just, you know, the revenue that was lost this year, it's a lifetime of revenue that goes away, and that's a quantifiable value. Key staff turnover spikes 300% after an acquisition. Turnover of acquired employees is twice as high for 9 years versus your legacy employees. And if you do a Google search for employee turnover after acquisition, there's almost 41 million results. This is not something everyone doesn't know about. Has anyone been through an acquisition besides Seth? No. I was just curious if you
We
guys.
almost were. We actually like were in the stage of being, it was announced that we were being acquired by a bigger accounting firm, and then something fell through, so it didn't happen.
Gotcha. After the announcement, did you see any clients or employees leave preemptively?
A couple employees did. Yep.
Yeah,
Because it would have changed a lot of job titles, and most not in a good way.
right, right. So when clients leave, you've got this client lifetime value that you can look at. What does it cost when a client leaves? When staff leaves, this industry, it costs 100 to $150,000 per head to replace between disruptions and training cost, hiring cost, all that. Key relationships walk. So one principal managing $2.5 million in client portfolio. If they leave and bring work with them, that can be extraordinarily expensive. And the law staff and clients don't vanish. They go to your competitors. So not only are you weaker, but you've just strengthened your competition. It's a double whammy there. The good news is with both clients and staff leaving, utilization rate should still be okay. Seth, thanks for laughing at that joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why does this happen? Like, what's the psychology of it? You know, I really always try to find the first principles. What's happening here? Well, I'll go back to old philosopher. An object in motion will tend to stay in motion. How many clients and employees do we have because change is hard? They just keep doing business with you, not because they really think you're the best, but because finding a new vendor would just be painful, right? Employees, how many are there? They're disengaged, but they're not looking anywhere else because that would be hard or it would be scary and, it's frightening. It might be risky. What if someone finds out that I'm looking? But once an acquisition happens, the old path forward no longer exists. Right? You can't stay the path because the path is gone. You got to, veer left or zag right, depending on which way you want to do. Staying is still change. So if I have to change anyway, let me explore my options. So the inertial drivers, lack of engagement, lack of preparedness, this introduction of new effort. If I got to do something new or different or it's going to take work, might as well look. And, another one of my sad stories that I love, a firm we worked with, big firm. We did a global client sentiment analysis and found their biggest client had a net promoter score of negative 40 something. It's over $1 billion in revenue from one account. So we raised the flag and said, hey, you've got an account that's at risk here. Over 100 stakeholders responded. I mean, it was not like, a couple of people. This was a very large multinational client working with them on 6 continents and across the board. They were just miserable. And unfortunately, even though we discovered this and highlighted it, the firm didn't do anything about it. And they lost the client. And the client went to their biggest competitor. So what did the CEO of the firm do? Bought his biggest competitor. He got the client back after laying off 9,000 people and then spending money to buy a competitor. All right. Not really the brightest strategy. What do you think the client feels about that? I already fired you once. So there's emotional drivers, uncertainty, fear, unearned trust, perceived effort of change, whether it's actually effort or not, there's a perception of it. So now what? What do we do with all that? Well, it comes down to value capture planning. This is where we start mapping the journey for all the stakeholders, and that's the exercise we're going to do today. I thought I had a slide in here that had the math behind how all of that leads up to my claim that you lose a third. So the math is back here, right? Okay. I'm going to move that slide further up in the deck. So I opened with the average acquisition loses a third of its potential value. So let's look at this $10 million valuation under standard methods. So Deltec, says typically a firm is valued at 45 to 60% of net service revenue, roughly 60 to $70,000 per full-time employee. Average turnover is 14%. Average turnover cost at 100K each. Average firm has revenue retention of 83%. That's your loyalty. So that means 17% annual revenue churn. Average profit margin of 13%. And if post-acquisition, you have a threefold increase in turnover and a 60% increase in churn, you're losing $1.3 million in client lifetime value and $4.2 million in turnover of employees for that $10 million company. So that's $5 million in value lost on a $10 million valuation. All right. That's massive. The people selling the firm, you know, they might still retire well, but they're not going to get the yacht they had maybe dreamed about. Right? That extra 50% is oftentimes your fund money. And firms that, pay 50, buyers that pay $15 million and actually end up only getting $10 million in value, it's going to take them years to recover all of that and see the return on equity that they invested. So it's kind of lose-lose all around here. Do you follow that math? Do you believe me now that a $10 million acquisition is losing $5 million in value? Does that drive out?
Feels high, but I believe you.
Yeah. Even if it's half that, that's still a ton, right?
Yeah, yeah. I don't doubt that it's significant.
No doubt that it's significant. So, all right. So getting back to value capture planning, and I'm going to walk you through this. And then we're going to do a value capture planning exercise after the break. So value capture planning, let's map the journey for all the stakeholders. So let's start out with a mindset and emotional map. This is some like very high level empathy mapping. So we're going to do a swim lane for seller, buyer, employee, client, and partner. So let's think about the seller. What are their emotions? I've got 3 on the screen here, but let me get you guys kind of expanding a little bit. What are they feeling going into an acquisition?
I would imagine a lot of excitement that this has been in the works for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Anxiety of what the real, there's excitement, but there's also like, I've never done this before, kind
Mhm.
of.
Yep. I haven't had a boss in 21 years. I went into this thinking, you know what, this could really suck.
Right.
Thankfully, it's proven not to, right? It hasn't been flawless. We did
Right.
not do nearly enough of this stuff ourselves, even though I tried. Um, but Marna, you had something?
Yeah, sorry for interrupting. I imagine that you're having to accept a certain amount of ambiguity, um, beyond all that you are preparing and do know. As a seller, you probably, like you said, you didn't know if you were what it was gonna be like to have a boss after so many years. So you accepted that ambiguity, knowing it could go either way.
Right. Yep.
Say it's kind of like getting married to someone you've known for about 6 months, right? Again, you
Yep.
feel like it's good. I mean, you've made a decision here, right? So there's a lot of
Uh-huh.
excitement, but there is a great deal of uncertainty, and a pretty significant amount of commitment usually for the ones that are doing selling, because it's not just a hey, we sold it, and you're usually tied to this for quite some time, as Ryan said, in a
Right.
variety of ways related to final compensation and non-competes and everything that goes into that. So I mean, there's a
Right. So you're getting
kind of
married
like
to
getting
someone you've known.
married. You don't just decide tomorrow you didn't like the way it worked out without it turning into a big old mess, right?
Right. You're not just marrying someone you've known for 6 months. You're doing so with a very unequal prenuptial.
There you go. That yeah.
Yep. So I don't want to go through all this because that's what the exercise is going to be. We're going to like really map this out. But buyer optimism, risk management, long-term reward, an easier future than the present. The buyer is like going to lean in. It's going to be rough for a while, but it's going to get better. Employee uncertainty, loss of family, loss of agency. But there might also be some opportunity. Might lose some position, might have opportunities for advancement. So there's a lot of mixed emotions there. Clients frustrated at the change, practical concerns, uncertainty, became a smaller fish in a bigger pond. I used to use a IT consultancy. They were a, small local company, 30 or so people. We were a big client. They took great care of us. Then they got acquired by a company with 1,000 employees, and all of a sudden we were a nobody. And then we got moved to a pod, and then it was a call center, and like we didn't matter. You know, I used to be able to call the CEO and make stuff happen. And then when I lost that, we left. Right. So I've been on both sides of this. I I've been a client of a company that's gotten acquired. I've sold the business. I've seen a few things here, right? And then the partners. Fear that the well runs dry. It's especially true in AEC. So Seth, if Ardura goes and buys a another company, bunch of their clients might wonder, well, does Ardura do what we do? And are they going to insource that instead of outsource that and look for the synergies? I mean, that's
Oh
smart
yeah.
business, right?
Yep.
But they can also be excited to add a bigger logo, worry about business arrangements and payments, especially if they're poorly run like a lot of these firms are. Is this going to disrupt cash flow?
Yep.
So we start, taking that emotional map and we do a lightweight journey here. What's happening in the preparation phase? What's happening in due diligence? What's happening with announcement? What happens day one? What about short term? What about long term? And we can start building out a map here of what to do. So as we break this down, if you're thinking about selling and you're in the preparation phase, you need to create a plan for value creation. Design your client experience, measure it. Design your employee experience, measure it. I tell you, when I went through due diligence, I had to prove our client satisfaction and our employee engagement. Thank God I do what I do because we had the numbers, right? And if I hadn't been able to do that, I'm sure our multiplier would have been lower and it would have cost me real tangible dollars. But the fact that we had substantial amounts of believable objective data made us look stronger. If you look stronger, you look lower risk. If you look lower risk, you can trade on a higher multiple. You guys all understand what I mean when I say a higher multiple? So in the M&A private equity world, businesses are valued usually at a multiple. So in AEC and accounting, you talk about a multiple of earnings. So usually you're going to see, 3 to 7 times annual EBITDA. So if you're generating $1 million a year in profit, you're going to be worth, $3 to $7 million to a buyer. In my world, software, it's a multiple of your annual recurring revenue. You're usually looking at, 3 to 12x depending on growth and scale, a few other things. So your multiple matters. There's a conference I go to every year, Morrissey Goodale. They do like a whole bunch of work within M&A. They have an annual M&A symposium. It's it's like a singles mixer. It's 300 firms and everyone's there to be bought or to buy, right? And all the talk is around, what'd you get for your multiple? What are you paying for multiples right now? I mean, that's the metric everyone's looking at. What's your multiple? So as a seller, what you want to do is maximize your multiple. You maximize your multiple by looking as valuable as you can. Growth impacts your multiple. The faster you're growing, the higher your multiple. The higher your net margin, the higher your multiple. Well, CX should help you grow. CX should help you increase your margin. All the data should make you look like a safer bet. So if you're in a business that might be acquired, makes a lot of sense to lean in on CX and EX. Buyers, in the prepare phase, you want to be looking for CX and EX winners. Firms that are delivering great experiences, firms that know how to do great experiences, probably have culture, they have systems, they have operations, they have all those things in place that make them lower risk buys. So if you're in the market to buy, you should be, using CX tools like ideal client profiles to make ideal firm profiles. You should be looking at CX awards. You should be looking at, best place to work type awards. Those are all good indicators you're going to have an asset that is more likely to be stickier and successful. I mean, a best place to work firm, it's a difficult buy because the employees really love it there and they're not going to want to see their stuff messed up. So if you're buying one of those, that really goes into your diligence, how you announce it, what you do day one, what you do short term to make sure those employees who love the place that they are keep on loving it. Right? Employees, we need to engage them and deliver good CX. So how do we help employees engage? How do we enable peak CX performance? Clients, give them a voice. Use data to measure and improve your value. And partners, we want to be using CX to create win-wins. Several firms we work with use vendor surveys to ask them, how well are we being the best partner we can be for you? How well are we enabling you to do your best work for us? You treat your partners well and they'll treat you well. Any questions about the preparation phase? This one's really about the seller and the buyer, the employee, client, and partner. They don't, know what's going on at that point usually. In the diligence phase, work with your buyer to build a clear plan with clients and employees. Don't wait till announcement. Before the deal, As a seller, work with your buyer to build a clear plan with clients and employees. Use CX tools to design, build a feedback plan. Think about all the journeys. If the leading cause of customer and employee churn is we're not helping them complete the journey, let's design the journey. What is day one going to look like? How are we going to announce this? Let's anticipate the fears and anxieties and have answers for those. I mean, none of this is not knowable. The difference is well, most companies just like, okay, it's going to be a shit show. We're just going to roll into it. And I would argue all of this stuff is something we can anticipate and we can manage around. As the buyer, gather more metrics. So much work. Let me tell you, the hardest thing I've ever done in my professional career was going through due diligence. The amount of data and documentation, and I mean, it was unbelievable the mountains of information I had to assemble and gather and share for their team to review and look at, right? Buyers need more. Um, we do a lot of work with companies on the buy side, and they'll bring us in to do due diligence, a client survey. We helped two firms walk away from a deal because we discovered some real fundamental problems with how those firms are taking care of clients. All right. One of them was a woman-owned, minority-owned business, and the feedback came back that the only reason why they were being hired was because they checked a box for state contracts. And once they got acquired and they lost those set-asides, there was no loyalty beyond that, right? So, you know, that's an extreme case with one very specific situation. Uh, we've certainly done that kind of work with other woman-owned, minority-owned businesses that clients absolutely loved them. And they kept clients because of the strength of what they did, not because of a set aside. Those are, good buys, right? Uh, doing that, you can find revenue at risk. What clients are indicating they're not happy? Well, the clients that are indicating they're not happy are the ones most likely to churn post-acquisition. Well, if you know what clients are unhappy, and I assure you in due diligence, you know exactly how much revenue each account is generating, you can start putting together a risk profile and say, hey, we've got $2.3 million of revenue that's, 60% likely to churn. So now you can start, as a buyer, factoring that in. You can start using that to negotiate your multiple down. Does that make sense? See, when I'm working for the seller, I'm trying to help them get the multiple up. When I'm working for the buyer, I'm trying to find the evidence to help them get the multiple down. Uh, you can also look for hidden value. Where has the firm created amazing experiences already? Where are they undercharging? Where are they not capitalizing on all the opportunities? And they just need a more sophisticated business operator to come in and capitalize on those things. So as a buyer, you can find secret hidden doses of value. That doesn't mean you're going to negotiate the multiplier down, but it starts to give you a sense of, is this going to be a, a good investment? And that can help you mitigate risks you find elsewhere. Estimating share of wallet is also a key step to do here. Share of wallet is one of those CX metrics too few firms utilize, but going through due diligence, combining that with your feedback metrics, you can start to identify what your share of wallet is by client and begin to know how big can we grow without having to bring new clients on. Um, watch for low employee engagement scores with key relationship managers. one project we did with the firm. They were buying a group in Texas, and we did both a employee survey and a client survey. So we were able to identify which employees had low engagement signals and high turnover risk, and we could map those employees to clients and what clients named those employees by name, saying, John's the reason why I'm here. And then because we had the financials, we could map the revenue to the client to the high turnover employee. And you can start to quantify, wow, we've got, $7 million of revenue that's likely to walk out the door following some principles that are flight risks. And now you can put some golden handcuffs on those principles where, some portion of the purchase price is set aside for, a 2 or 3 year, retention or earnout package. So you can start again mitigating your risk. And instead of having to do that, everywhere, you can do that in targeted places. If you do too much hold back, the deal's going to fall through because the sellers aren't going to sell if everything's held back. Right? So it's always a balancing act of giving the sellers what they want now, but then in a targeted way, holding back what you have to mitigate the risk that you've been able to discover. On the employee side, benchmark the employees, ask about culture and engagement, track employee net promoter score to identify the overall flight risks. If employee net promoter score is below 40, you probably have a culture where you're going to see a lot of turnover. Benchmark client experience. So systematic, objective measurement. Look for firms with net promoter score of 75 and higher. You're going to have very little turnover risk there. Watch out for firms with net promoter scores lower than 40. And because you're doing this during due diligence, you know where the revenue is by account. That's all part of the NDA and what the buyer's got access to. Make sure you're asking at least the top 80% of revenue, which usually is, half the client base or less, right? But if there is a name that's being excluded from the survey, that's a lot of information you should know as a buyer as well. Make sure key decision makers are measured in the top accounts. And then look for some of those net promoter drivers, partnering, focusing on outcomes to identify where you've got true loyalty versus a marriage of convenience. And then make sure you know who the raving fans are, so you've got some immediate cross-selling opportunities after acquisition, right? Seth, if Ardura buys another company, you guys keep buying. If you buy another company, you're going to have new expertise, you're going to have new service offerings, you're going to have all kinds of new things you can bring to the market. Knowing who your current raving fan clients are, that should be your first round of business development post-acquisition, going to your current clients with all these new things. And the clients you just bought, going to them
Right.
with, look at all the things Ardura can do for you now. So there's always going to be some value leakage after an acquisition. You counter that with strategically targeting growth where it's going to be most successful. And then with your trade partners, benchmark customer effort score. This is a really interesting one. Your trade partners in a survey will tell you how hard or easy you are to do business with. They'll tell you about the systems, the back office processes, like all the pain points and frustrations. So as a buyer, you start to figure out how much of a mess are we buying? Do they have their stuff together? Do they pay their bills on time? Are their processes already in good shape? Or is this, a business that's going to need a whole lot of re-engineering to keep things rolling? Then you really start getting in. Before I keep going, any questions about the due diligence phase?
That just sounds intensely long, and how does it have an end point?
Yeah. So, um, due diligence typically is going to take 4 to 8 months from when, you know, the conversations begin in earnest until a buy-sell agreement is executed. So you do have to move fairly quickly. Um, some of the earliest stuff that's done in due diligence is things like employee list, client list, revenue. That stuff's all pretty easy to pull. So that's what you need to execute the client, employee, and partner surveys. So all of that should be able to be done in 6 weeks. It's quick, but everybody is motivated, right? Buyers motivated, sellers motivated, everybody's motivated. Now, what's important in that, and this is where, it's going to sound self-serving here, but that's where you need a third party. Um, because the buyer can't execute the survey without everybody knowing that there is an acquisition going on, right? So it has to look like the seller is doing it because it's just the right thing to do. So one thing you'll notice on Client Savvy's website, we don't advertise any of our M&A services. We don't want someone, inside a firm, oh yeah, we're going to go do a client survey and a Client Savvy is helping us, and they go to our website and they see all this talk about mergers and acquisitions, then everyone's scared. When most of the time we're doing surveys just because firms are being smart and intelligent and proactive about experience management, right? So you've got to be thoughtful around that, and it's got to look like the seller is doing these surveys because it's just good, smart, strategic things to do. We can come in and, on behalf of the buyer, work with the seller, be that invisible layer that arbitrates between the two and make sure it's all above board. So, day one, the seller, justified reassurance. Use your past feedback. You just got some, hopefully, during the due diligence phase. And if you've been doing feedback for a long time, you've got a long history of it. Use past feedback to identify the brand strengths. Ideally, the buyer has been doing feedback too. And so you can come to the market with, look, here's what you love about us. Here's what their clients love about them. Look at the overlap. So you can start using that feedback, around specific strengths and brand promises to provide justified reassurance. It's not enough to say everything's going to be okay. What's the data that proves it? So we can reassure clients and staff that the strengths that they love will remain. So it's really important both the buying firm and the selling firm have that feedback from employees, clients, etc., to tell that narrative. The buyer needs to communicate the client and an employee experience. What's the plan? If the leading cause of failures we're not helping clients and employees complete the journey, we need to reveal the map. Here's the journey we're going to take you on. Here's the steps. Here's how we've thoughtfully designed the steps to be as positive for you as possible. And so you're designing that journey to lean in on all of the optimism and hope and to mitigate against all the fear and uncertainty. The employees should be reviewing the client experience plan. They should see confidence in their role, that they should see clarity. Little things, like one of the things that drove me nuts. Between architecture and client savvy, I ran IT for an architecture firm. So I know a thing or two about information systems. All right. Leading up to day one, I'm begging, hey, what's the plan for IT? How are we going to start collaborating together? Like, what systems are we going to? And it wasn't until after the ink was dry that elements of the IT plan started rolling out. So you think everyone on my team was anxious around, like, am I going to be able to check my email? Am I going to be able to get my job done? And when the well-meaning VP of IT on day 2 tells us he's shutting off our Slack in 3 days and we have to migrate to the new one, do you think that raised some ire and concern? Right? So by not doing that, it introduced all these unforced errors, all this anxiety, all this uncertainty, all this fear around, am I going to be able to get my job done? Am I going to be able to take care of my clients? Am I going to lose access to history that I search and rely on a daily basis? So I was able to talk IT off of that and give us a runway. But by not anticipating that and communicating the runway, it introduced all this fear and anxiety that didn't need to happen. Right? So a lot of these things, it's death by a thousand cuts. It's a lot of little things that on their own aren't devastating, but by not thinking about and anticipating those, you just erode confidence every step of the way. And the few things that go poorly are the things you remember. All the stuff that goes smoothly, you don't remember, right? Clients are consuming communications. So we should position all the comms from the client's perspective. It's not about us. It's not about what we get out of this. It's about what the client's going to get from this. And we need to show the plan to continue their acknowledged strengths. We heard you. We've got your feedback. We know that you love this. Here's how we're going to keep doing that for you. So it feels less like I have to go left or right. And if they go right, that means they go right to a competitor, right? We want to show them as much as possible the road ahead is still straight. And then our partners. Anticipate how trade partners can win in the new order. Communicate opportunities. Reassure smooth operations. Like plan on day of announcement your key partners. Let them in on some opportunities. If you know you're going to have some job opportunities, that you can share around, what better way to make your partners just thrilled at this new paradigm for the announcement to start with, here's some ways we're going to expand with you. And then your partners are going to be a lot more forgiving when the inevitable bumps in the road come along. Day 1 for the seller, today is the same as yesterday. Don't start changes on day 1. For most employees, they're just learning day 1 about the whole thing, right? Oftentimes the announcement is day 1. Katie, it sounds like in your situation, you learned about it before day 1 happened, but a lot of times these things are uh, non-disclosure until day 1. So announce and day 1 are the same day. Did you know about it because you were on the inside track of leadership? Did
I
everybody know
actually,
about it?
when this happened, I didn't know about it. This was a few years ago, pre-COVID actually. So,
So you learned about it after the fact.
hmm
Yeah. All right. On the buyer side, nail the basics. Day 1, do no wrong. Like, if nothing's changing, then do no wrong. Don't make any unforced errors. For the employee, share the milestone. What's the day 1 plan? What's the week 1 plan? What's the month 1 plan? Ideally, if you have engaged, motivated employees, they like being accomplished. They like being successful. If we don't tell them what success looks like in the new paradigm, they're going to be uncertain. If they're uncertain, they might start looking. Once they start looking, they're liable to leave. We want to avoid them even considering looking. So, what does success look like for each employee on day 1? Give them something to be successful with, where they can feel accomplished. I did it. I did what I was supposed to do, right? Even if it's just, filling out some paperwork.
And I'll say more than looking, your employees will get targeted, period.
Yeah. because everybody knows once an acquisition happens, everyone's vulnerable.
Yep.
I know a lot of recruiters in the industry who very specifically wait for someone to get bought, and then they're vultures targeting
It is
everybody.
vultures. Yes.
Uh-huh. Yep. So y- you've got vultures out there targeting your people. How do you make your people feel so successful that they decline entertaining any of those opportunities? Right? If they feel accomplished, if they feel like they're contributing, they're less likely to leave. And if we don't have a plan for that, we just have to hope that they get there. That's one key thing a lot of failures happen from. For clients, day one, the same but better. Communicate, communicate, communicate. You can start to introduce future change, but don't change today. For now, keep uh, sending your invoices here, keep working with this team here. Tell them how it's all the same. But you can start to reveal what's coming in the future. For your trade partners, make sure the first month there's no delays in payment. All right. It's the one thing that they're going to be really fair about. Look at other business in flight. Award a new project day one or the first week if you can. I mean, maybe you're going to award it anyway. Hold it a week. Instead of awarding it the week before, wait a week and award it day one. I mean, it's the same thing. They're winning the work one way or the other, but now they're winning it with the new paradigm. That's an immediate sigh of relief that, hey, we're going to keep going together. Anything else on day one?
The only thing I would remind people is it's going to be a shock to a large number of people on day one, right? Employees, clients, everybody. Some may not be surprised, but in our case, for sure, the large majority were incredibly surprised. They
Hmm.
had no idea an acquisition was even a glint in anybody's eyes.
Right. Yeah. I was a little different on mine. A smaller company, I was able to do it, but I had one-on-ones with everybody months before it happened, just to keep
Yeah. And
everybody
we
engaged.
couldn't.
Right.
We of course had. It's kind of like some of the stuff, again, usually it's only the ownership that is allowed to have with a whole bunch of non-disclosures to have any
Yeah.
insight into what's going on. And, the thing that you also have to remember is those people, not only is it a surprise to people, but the the people that did know have often known for a while. So they've had a time to go through all the emotions and thoughts about
Yep.
this and understand it's going to take a while for everybody because
Yep.
it's almost like the stages of grief, right? It really
Yep.
is because they're losing something. They're losing this company they thought they worked for. There's a whole lot of things to work through emotionally in the, days and a few weeks to come for a whole lot of people.
Yeah. I, as a founder selling my business, it was 3 weeks of very strong emotion between when they first
Yeah.
approached me and I decided to step forward into exploring it. Really emotional. And so I wanted to make sure I was able to take each of our people through that journey carefully and thoughtfully, um, and not spring it all on them on day one. And then we have all the chaos of trying to integrate and everything else and deal with emotion, right?
Yep.
So everyone on my team knew, I don't know, 5 months before it actually closed. So we had plenty of time to work through it together. And
That's a luxury.
yeah, yeah. It's easy.
That's great.
I had 17 people, so it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
When you've got, 500 or something like that, definitely a lot harder to do that. So luxury of a small
Uh,
business there. But
and in our case, maybe 10% new. So then
right,
90% of the people were finding out all
day
at
one.
once. And it's not usually they're finding out this is going to happen. They find out that this has happened, right? It's
Right. This
you
has
know,
happened. Yep.
right.
Right. And, you know, because that's the way tactically it often has to happen.
Yep.
Understanding, all right, we've just done something. There's emotion. Like you said, there's going to be grieving. So, how do
Yeah.
we, if we can anticipate that, how do we design for that to minimize the trauma and maximize the hope? And I think
Yeah.
way too often people just realize, it's just going to suck. So, we're just, like we'll write a good memo and there'll be a all hands with the new boss and the old boss kind of taking turns talking through it and you know and then people are going to sign off and go home and talk to their spouse and like all the text messages going between the coworkers and like it can just crescendo into chaos, and it usually
Yep.
does. So
And it's going to some extent, no matter what you do, there is to some
oh yeah,
extent some of that's going to happen because you can't prepare enough. But
right,
you know, the good thing and the bad thing is assuming you're a good company, and I'm going to assume we're all good companies, and we're only going to try to acquire good companies. The people that work there have a very strong feeling about the company they work for, right? Assuming all
yep,
the EX things benchmarked well, and we were acquiring that type of company, there's a lot of really strong feelings tied to the company they're with.
cool.
Hey,
Yeah,
Ryan. Um,
yeah,
Ryan, I just want to share, it's a funny story. I was a part of an organization previous to the one I'm in now where we acquired multiple, different companies. And so I saw it kind of play out and in different ways. But I was watching, I don't know if you guys have ever watched Mad Men, but there was the one of the episodes where they were acquired by this company in England and they just came out onto the floor and they're like, this is what we did. Everyone go back. And it just reminded me of what you were talking about, like the chaos. And it was chaos completely. I mean,
yeah.
for a while. But when I've been part of it, it was like there was some of these, and some of them were done better than others, these different stages. And so it's really interesting to hear. And I love the way you can integrate CX and EX metrics and sort of
Right.
getting that information to make it easier and along the way, to in the prepare and diligence, doing those things to assess, but also afterwards, I'm interested to hear what else we can apply there. So thanks.
So the value of the two executive teams coming together during due diligence and journey mapping together, right? So both sides go in knowing, understanding, empathetic. It takes away a lot of the seat of your pants and a lot of the, well-intentioned but fatally flawed approaches. And it becomes much more thoughtful and integrated. So short term, as you go through this, you start talking about succession execution, right? So as the seller, you probably have some runway. You're sticking around post sale, like I'm still here, right? So making sure we flawlessly execute the CX and EX plan. It's not about you as the seller anymore. So our job as sellers is to focus on the emotional drivers of the others. My role the last 8 months has been, shepherding my clients, shepherding my people, making sure each one of them feels heard, feels advocated for, feels like I've got their back. That's why they hired me or worked for me in the past, right? They felt like I was a partner with them. You can't abandon them in this phase. And I'm not their employer anymore. I'm not their, vendor anymore. But I still need to like double down on the advocacy role. So making sure the sellers, you know, as they're offloading responsibilities post sale, they need to carve out time for that advocacy of their people, of their clients. Buyer, learn before you change. Yeah, that's I knew, and I'm being careful because I'm recording here, but I knew that clearly rated didn't know what they were buying. right? I knew what made us special. I knew how we competed against them. I knew all those things. And I don't, because they didn't know what they were buying, they came in and, had some ideas about how things should be done. And it's been really interesting now, 9 months later. And it was a journey. It took a while, but they started having some real aha moments like, oh, you guys did that better than we do. And oh, you do that better than we do. And um, now we've got to the point where the client savvy product is going to be the core product going forward. And they're going to merge the best of Clearly Rated into our product. And they probably thought it was going to be the other way around, right? So going in with more humility on the front end of let's really look and see what's working before we start making changes. Go through a keep, grow, prune exercise. What are we going to keep that they're doing well? What are we going to grow that they're doing well? And what are we going to have them stop doing because that's not effective? And drive the excitement about making mother better too. You got some pride of ownership here, right? So the acquired, you just did something to them. You took away some agency because they weren't, signing up for this. And they're proud of who they are and how they do things. So early on, spend more time talking about what do you do best that we can learn from before you start telling them how to do things. Seth, do you think Ardura did that well?
No, not great.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's pretty typical. The mothership comes in with, let me tell you how things are going to go. And there's a
No, I mean,
lot.
I'll say they almost were the opposite of like just keep doing what you're doing,
Okay.
which was good. I mean, that's
Hmm.
good, but everybody knows things are going to change, and there was a lot of people that are like, well, if things are going to change, let's talk about what those changes are.
Right.
Whereas Ardura was incredibly patient and was basically said, if you want to keep things going exactly the way you're doing them now for the next year, that's fine. Um, but we had a lot of people on our side. It's like, well, but we want to leverage the benefits of this, right? We're telling
Right.
people there's benefits of this. Well,
Right.
we need to show them there's benefits of this. And it's not going to be by doing things exactly the way we've been doing them forever.
Right. Right. So as the buyer, you can engage that change conversation carefully and humbly, with the comparing best practices, you know, things like that.
Yeah, and we've actually, I guess, to some extent, been fortunate to also have, since we came into Ardura, we've had two other firms that have come into our region that we've acquired since we've been here. So we've seen
Well,
both sides, and
yep,
we've had an opportunity to try to do things better as the ones kind of leading the
yep,
integration with these two new firms than how we felt like we were integrated.
right. So in the short term, benchmark employee experience again. So shortly after the shock has waned, don't wait too long. 90 days is a long time, and you may have just benchmarked employee experience right before all this happened. But survey fatigue is not a thing when you're in rapid change, right? So let's quickly get back into measurement. And you want to be thoughtful about crafting your questions here because you don't want to open up to where they can just complain about everything. We don't want them to, you don't want to lead them into negativity. And so they start complaining about it and then they start reinforcing it. They start telling everybody else about it and you end up with this downward spiral. So you want to thoughtfully design your employee experience survey to be forward-looking and optimistic while still being authentic enough to collect true concerns and criticism. But if you design the mechanism wrong, well-meaning, you open up a bitch fest that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Same kind of thing on the client experience. So repeat the diligent assessment, but now you're looking ahead. Frame your questions now that you've experienced our expanded capabilities. They may not have experienced your they probably haven't experienced your expanded capabilities. But again, you're engineering these questions to be optimistic and forward thinking so that, that if they come back and say, well, we haven't experienced any of your expanded capabilities, what did you just do? You just opened up a sales conversation. Oh, well, let me talk to you about our expanded capabilities. Here's what we can do now. Are there any of those you would like to experience to make our delivery of services more complete and fulfilling for you? Right? So we can be really targeted with these. They can still be authentic, reach out to make sure we're doing well by them. But again, question design can be really thoughtful here to create real meaningful opportunities, both for retention and expansion. Look for newly at-risk clients and intervene. You might have had clients that were 10 out of 10 net promoter in due diligence, and now they're 7 out of 10. You can start putting the account recovery plans in place. Look for curious cross shoppers and capture them. You should ask an expansion question in there somewhere. That's, are there any additional services we haven't provided before that you'd be interested in learning about now? And if there's, 3 or 4 specifically you want to list, you can put them in there as parentheticals, but you start creating some curiosity there. Partners, meet with each substantial partner. Discuss expanded business. You one of my longtime favorite partners at Client Savvy was a local IT company, Wingswept. I'm friends with the CEO. We've done business together for years. They've taken great care of us. Um, I had done a little bit of CX consulting with them, and their biggest cause of customer churn is when their customers get acquired. Right? So I called Jay, like that was a personal phone call. Hey Jay, guess what? We're in due diligence. We're likely to be acquired. And I know you told me your leading cause of customer churn is because clients get acquired. Um, uh, there may be an opportunity for you to take on both accounts post-acquisition because they're not that much bigger than us. So let me work with you and see if we can put you in a position to do that. All right. And come to find out, Wingsup is actually cheaper. And they almost won it, but then there was some legal stuff and that they lost, which really bums me out. But at least we, kind of had a engaged partner going through that process. Long term, the seller gets to go fishing, right? Or whatever their thing is. I'm never gonna go fishing. That's not my thing, but that's just the colloquialism, right?
Go
Uh,
racing.
yeah, go racing. My retirement's gonna be fast, not slow. Uh, I'll go out in a ball of flame. So relax. You've captured all the value you created. Relax. Your staff are in good hands. Relax. Your clients are taken care of. I mean, now we're getting to an outcome that sellers can look back at the exit and be proud of what they did. Right? The buyer. Integrate the best of both orgs. Assure buyers have the same experience with new services as with the old. So you've got a unified client experience now. So as clients from both organizations start, cross shopping between teams, they feel like they're getting the same experience no matter what team they're buying from. And the faster you unify the client experience, the faster you turn 2 teams into one. Employees, they have to execute on the CX. So let's engage employees in the CX plan. Again, we have really smart, highly motivated individuals in this industry. Look, we're not dealing with, people that are just showing up to work most of the time when you're dealing with high value professional services. These people care about the profession. They want to do great work. So let's engage them in the CX plan. The more they can see, here's how we're going to deliver great CX, the more engaged they're going to be. And we can drive accountability with CX measurement. Clients, continuous feedback. Keep the feedback going. Continue the plan of ongoing regular feedback. Cross-sell when it's earned. Mitigate risk when it's observed. And you're going to cut down on that churn. Our partners measure and reduce effort to serve. Use our scale to buy more from partners. If we're buying more from partners and we're easier to do business with, might they give us some price breaks? Can we pass those price breaks on to our clients or keep it as extra margin when we mark things up? There can be some real value in that. So share in effort and work capture savings. Both of us should be able to walk away more profitable. So measuring success after the acquisition, track your turnover, track it like a hawk. Track your investment and return on investment with all these CX things. Benchmark. "23 CX leaders on the ENR 500 list that are clients of ours gained 39 spots on average on the ENR list in 1 year. So you're going through these acquisitions, you can really start moving up these lists and see the results of that. You're starting to see how you can put a plan together to maybe not find, 50% more value, but find a good chunk of that value post-acquisition. So measure, design, and then capture. That's how we create and capture value in the merger acquisition process. Any questions before we take a short break and then jump into the exercise? All right. You guys are easy today. It's Friday afternoon, so we're all ready for the weekend, right? Seth, you're on mute.
Absolutely. That's all I said. Absolutely.
And Jennifer, Seth, and I are closer to it than Marnie and Katie because we're East Coast, so we're that much closer. All right. So what I'm going to do here, chat, dropping a link into the mural. That's going to guide the last part of our time today. And these workshops aren't, meant to be busy work. We don't have to complete this exercise today, but I want you to at least start thinking through it. So we have the stakeholder emotion and value map. So I gave you kind of a high level overview of that already today. And what I want us to do is take some time and maybe each one of you pick a row and just kind of work your way through. Think about the emotions. What does a best case outcome look like? Top fears. And then go through the journey of preparation, diligence, announce, day one, short term, long term. So I want you to, put 5, 6, 7 thoughts or ideas in each one of these boxes. And then as you reflect back on that row, pick something on there that's like, you know what? I think there's some real value here. There's some real fear with this, or boy, day one should really nail this. Like whatever it is, and just use your CX brain and see if you can't build out a plan for how you're going to change that moment or maximize that outcome for your stakeholder. Is that assignment pretty clear? Yep. All right. So I don't really care which row you guys work on. You can collaborate on the same row if you want to. You can each pick a row. But since these are 3-hour workshops and they're fairly long, I'm gonna give us a 20-minute break here. It's 2:20 Eastern. So let's come back at 2:40. If you guys want to get started on this, you can. If you want to like check out for a little bit, check your emails, take a quick break, grab lunch, whatever it is, you can do that. But we'll come back online at 20 till the hour and we'll start working through this together. Sound good? All right. And we'll see you guys in 20. Hey guys, welcome back.
Hello.
Hey,
Hey there.
all right. So I see a couple of you are working. Let's see. Looks like Marnie, you're doing employee. Jennifer, you're working on buyer. All right. Any questions or thoughts?
Uh,
Anything I can help with?
I have a quick clarifying question, please,
Yeah,
Ryan. So if I understand correctly, these first few boxes around key motions, best case, top fears, that is from the perspective of the person or in the category, the buyer, the employee, the client, correct?
that's right.
And then we sort of switch to the buyer perspective when we move into preparation, due diligence, etc.
No, so if you're doing the employee role, you're going to do
Yeah.
employee all the way through.
So it's employee point of view all the way through these
Right,
set. Got it. Okay.
right.
Thank you.
Yep. So, which means in the employee and due diligence, there's really not a whole lot the employee is doing there, right? We're doing things to the employee, maybe during those phases, but the employees doesn't know what's happening, so there's really not a whole lot going on there. So the employee's journey really kind of picks up at announce. Now, there could be, things you want to do to the employee during preparation and due diligence. And so you can, it's no map is ever clean. So that's one of those things you do kind of switch into what's the seller doing to the employee? Because the buyer's not really doing anything to the employees during that phase.
I
I mean,
get that.
the buyer could by maybe buying some LinkedIn ads to target the employees of the target company, showcasing cool projects they're working on or showcasing best workplace to win or best workplace awards. I mean, there's things the buying company could be doing to the target employees without letting the cat out of the bag, right? There are some things they could be doing from a marketing and comms perspective to build their brand with the target. So it looks like let's see. So Katie, you're working on client. Cool. Looks like Seth is maybe still on break, so that's all right.
Ryan, sorry, I'm getting a little confused in my head. So for client preparation, am I doing it from the perspective of like what our firm would do to prepare the clients?
Yeah, well, same thing with the employee. The you know clients and employees aren't really engaged in the journey actively until
Gotcha.
announcement. So
Okay.
for those two boxes on the client side, you could be thinking about as the seller, what would I do to my clients during this phase? As the buyer, what would I do to my potential future clients during this phase? So you can,
Okay.
think about it from that perspective. Um, but yeah, it's the those two boxes are a little tougher because they don't know about the acquisition yet. So,
Right.
is there anything you can do in the preparation, in due diligence to make the path easier? And you could do that from either the perspective of the buyer or the seller, or
Okay.
both. And as you're going through for each box, really try to think of, using empathy. You're thinking about journeys, all the stuff about CX. Try to dig deep enough to find something innovative, different, valuable that can be done there that might really move the needle.
Hey Ryan, quick
Yes.
question. Sorry if you said this and I was typing. When you said build out a plan, you meant like to maximize the outcome. And some of that is in my little boxes, but can you say more about that? Like the last
Yeah.
box,
So you did the
the client. I mean, sorry, the buyer.
buyer, yeah. So as you look through, like increasing revenue, capture short-term and long-term, don't lose staff
Okay.
or clients, synergy. So,
Yeah.
so, all right, increase
Those are
revenue,
the outcomes.
right? So if you're gonna focus in on the CX side of increasing revenue capture, like what would that look like? How would you use CX to go assure that best case? You might, pick something else.
Gotcha.
Prepare all possible FAQs, share the clear plan. Okay, well, like map that out. What are some of the questions you would anticipate? How would you communicate that? So the goal here is
Okay.
like pick one thing, like as you
One
went through
thing,
that, is there
not the
one
whole
thing that,
thing.
yeah, yeah. Like don't do
Okay.
it all. We don't have time today,
Right.
but you know, pick something and just all right, how would a CX leader like tackle that? So we don't need
Yeah.
a complete plan, but just, sketch some legs around
Yep.
it.
Okay. Perfect. That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Yep. And then the hope is that we can, you can walk us through your role, like what you thought about, and then walk us through the plan that you built. I will tell you, I'm looking forward to the time of year when 3 o'clock doesn't leave sun like blaring in onto me. Seth looks like a man who showed up with the plan all figured out.
Not at all. Instead, I look like a man that checked his team's messages, which was probably a mistake, but I'm back.
You can see everyone's working through a row.
Yep. Yep.
You can certainly jump in and tag team with someone else's or start your own if you'd like.
Okay.
And if you don't want to feel behind and you want to catch up, the last column, pick one, build a plan. You can certainly piggyback off of someone else's
Okay.
and just read through their sticky notes. And if one of those sticky notes is like, oh man, I want to like solve for that, you can pick that. And
Okay.
I'm sure your colleagues won't mind if you hijack one of their ideas and build it out.
It's more assistance. I'm not hijacking.
You're adding to their excellence, right?
I'm just adding value. That's all I'm doing here. I'm
That's
creating
right.
value. Okay.
You guys want a few more minutes to keep working? Everyone's on mute, so I didn't hear an answer.
Yes, please.
All right. Our plans are starting to look a little complete here. Anyone ready to report out? Seth, you were last one in. You want to be first one out?
Yep. If I can unmute, I'd started feeling some stuff on the first one, but I also added in. I think you can see it on your screen there.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Walk
day
us.
one short term
Okay. Walk us through it.
for employees, and some of this is things we did, and some of these are things we didn't do that I wish we'd done. Um, so to try to kind of deal with the day one short term, understand there's going to be a lot of emotion. So make sure you provide that opportunity for staff to engage with their concerns and have one-on-ones with key management, both former and new. And honestly, former is probably most important on day one in short term. Um, to validate their feelings and the things that they're going through, make sure leadership and management have the tools necessary to be able to help staff navigate through that process. They likely went through the same process themselves already. So it's important for them to empathize and understand what everybody's kind of going through. The last thing you want to do is minimize any of the feelings anybody has as they're going through this. And again, it's going to be a range. Some people are just going to be excited. Some people are going to be devastated. And again, I think it's really important for leadership to understand that and know what to do in those different situations and to make sure staff have an ability to be heard as you kind of go through that. I picked up some of the other things that had been listed there as well of concerns of how to deal with things like with clients, that type of thing. So it's important. And I think it's in some other areas here too. Um, is having those talking points, being consistent, both in how we communicate to clients so that staff know what to say and how to explain this to their clients when they're working with them, but also so that everybody that's talking to employees is also on the same page. That was something we tried to work really hard with management of, okay, these are the things, this is the why, this is the, let's make sure we're telling people, because if they start hearing different things from different people, you can break a lot of trust. One
Right.
way to keep trust is to make sure we're all consistent in what we're saying and what we're communicating at the end of the day. So trying to get all of that kind of in place for a consistency standpoint.
Right. What do you guys think? Any feedback for Seth on that?
No, I just want to say I really appreciate what you shared and certainly the validating people's experience or where people like meeting people where they're out, where they're at and validating their emotions. So it's great.
Yeah, and I mean, we had a lot of people that had been with our firm for a long time, and we are a 95-year-old firm. We had people that had been here, 20, 30, 40 years. And it's kind of like getting a new job, or it feels like that without choosing it. So again, there was a wide range of them. And honestly, the leadership had some of the worst emotions. I'm just going to be honest, because again, a lot of those people were the people that had been here a long time and were really vested in the company. So they had some of the strongest emotions and figuring out how to navigate that without passing that to staff who were honestly less impacted than leadership and management. That was a real challenge.
So digging deeper on day one and kind of talking about announcement, do you tell everyone at 9 o'clock in the morning? Do you do it at lunch? Do you do it at 4:30?
So the way we did it is we did it pretty early because we wanted to get it out to staff relatively early with an immediate follow up with clients. Because again, it was important to control the narrative. We wanted to make sure A, staff heard it from us, B, clients heard it from us. And that, all of that was communicated before there was a broad announcement made, um, even company wide. So we actually did it initially with the people that were being acquired. is how what we focused on. Made those announcements, handled some of the internal stuff. Then we could make broader announcements. Then we could make announcements to the market, all of those type things. But that was kind of how we did it. And I think it worked pretty well. I think for some client stuff, some people talked about that. I mean, we were prepared with all of our key clients of, okay, as soon as we announce it internally, these are the people that are going to reach out personally to all of the key clients and make that call and tell them what was going on and what was going to be announced. And again, same type of thing, talking points, why we were doing this, the benefits, how it was going to affect them hopefully positively, and how what we were going to make sure there was no negative effects.
And as you really start thinking through, particularly engineering firms staffed with a lot of introverts. Introverts often need time to process before they can respond. So,
Also, don't like change. A lot of
also
people
don't
that
like
don't
change,
love
right?
change. Yeah. It doesn't matter good or bad. It doesn't matter. They don't love it.
Right, right. So you know, I'm not arguing that you should do it at the end of the day versus the beginning of the day. I haven't really thought about that specifically myself, but really thinking through how do we handle the introverts? Because if we tell them at the beginning of the day, and there may be an overwhelming set of reasons why we choose to do so, how do we create space for the introverts to have time to process? And, do you leave an hour on the agenda where everyone goes back to their desk and, can just like think for a minute before the one-on-one start or some of those kinds of
Yeah.
things? You know, Trying to create those spaces becomes important as you think through who your stakeholders are and how you manage them.
When I
Did you
was
tell?
told personally, it was at the end of the day.
Uh-huh.
I knew for a month or two before the rest of the announcement, since I had some ownership stake, so I had to be part of that process. And I don't know if that was better or not either, because that
Right.
also was just it was a lot of something you weren't expecting to go home and mull over. Um,
Right.
I don't know.
And that's part of this exercise. You may choose to do it at the beginning of the day. And if you choose, let's practice some empathy. Let's think about the journey. And if we're going to choose beginning of the day because reasons, then let's put some safeguards in place to make the beginning of the day work as well as possible. If we're
Yeah.
going to choose to do it at 4:30 p.m. because reasons, how do we do it at the end of the day, and what are the consequences and side effects of doing it end of day given our stakeholder group, right? So that's the kind of thing you want to think about, and you know that way, again, we're helping everybody complete the journey as successfully as possible. Did you have a plan for those that were on PTO or out sick that day?
We did for the most part. So depending on who they were and where they were in the organization, some we reached out to tell them basically in advance of them going on PTO just to make sure they weren't behind. Some we elected to reach out to because just again we knew that they were reachable to basically give them the news as soon as the announcement was coming out before they
Right,
heard it otherwise too. We just wanted to make sure everybody received the information in a timely manner and front and in the right way, the best we could.
right,
I wouldn't
right,
say so. I mean, there's probably at least one that fell through the cracks somewhere if we couldn't get in touch with or whatever else. But I think we did a pretty good job
yeah.
of like identifying just like that. We tried to identify who's going to be on PTA. What are we going to do? Who's going to do it? Um, that type of thing.
Right. Any other thoughts for Seth on ways you'd pick or pull or push his plan to close any other gaps? I'm sure you guys can think of some. And it's not criticizing Seth. It's all of us engaging our CX skills here.
Yeah.
I'll just riff off of something Seth said, which is, setting the employees up to be successful with their clients in this moment. It's very much, I keep thinking back to an hour ago, Ryan, when you were sharing the math around the due diligence and setting up that sale for success, and employees are so much a part of that. So
Right.
I would hope that the thoughtfulness around the employee experience in this moment is, as Seth was describing, like this, I came into this session not really knowing where CX and EX fit into mergers and acquisitions. And now I'm at, a couple hours later feeling like, if not now, when? Like there's always a
Right.
business case for CX and EX, but this is really on steroids. Why and when you need to think and act this way. And when you think about the employees being, all those metrics you shared and all the dollars around those metrics, it's really critical that you, like Seth's organization, really thought through all those nuances. And I hadn't thought about the people on PTO. Of course, you don't want them finding out the wrong
Right.
way, especially if they're one of those managers Seth spoke about who is really going to be really affected emotionally. Perhaps while they're trying to relax on a boat somewhere.
Right.
Um, yeah.
So it's interesting you bring up that point about employees now having to share the message with clients. So as we start putting these pieces together, we have introverted employees who need time to process. They're highly emotional because something just happened and they don't like change. And in that moment where they're uncertain, they're emotional, and they haven't had time to process, they have to communicate to clients. Does that feel like a recipe for possible disaster?
Indeed. And so in my plan, I have a sticky around providing client-facing employees communications that's somewhat templatized, but can be personalized. So it's on message from the buyer point of view and their values, etc. But it takes the head and the heart out of that very important communication piece from the employee. They don't have to manage their emotions when they're communicating with their client, because that is a big thing. Is I have to talk. I have client meetings today. I just got this, like you were asking, do we share this news in the morning or the afternoon? Well, many of these people are going to have client meetings that day. So perhaps better to do it at the end of the day. But by providing some predetermined, approved executive marcoms to your client facing folks, that would be a tremendous help, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we tried to set it up so the people that were doing the client outreach, again, we were really focused specifically on all of our key clients. As part of that, were people that had known, that were part of the leadership team, the management team, that were aware of this and weren't having to do that processing that day. That it was on them to do that initial outreach, to have that discussion. Um, Again, one of our concerns was getting staff back to work too, right? Because that's another thing, is like this wrecked a few days, right? And we knew it would, and it's inevitable. It turns into water cooler
Utilization's going to
conversations and
tank that month.
everyone talk. Right. But we tried to really emphasize that with clients, or with our staff too, of the most important thing we can do is continue to do what we were doing yesterday. Right. And just keep doing that. And the projects we're working on, all of these things, because it's a huge moment of truth for clients, right? Because you're going to call and you're going to tell them everything's going to be great and this is going to be better for you and nothing's going to be worse. And that you're making this promise, because everyone's going to make that promise, right? To try to address that with clients, that we're going to make this as smooth as possible and you're not going to see any differences. Anything that goes wrong, whether it had anything to do with the merger,
Right.
immediately someone's going to think, well, it's because this happened, right? I mean, it's just, they're
Right.
looking for something to go wrong. They're looking for evidence that this is a negative thing,
Right.
honestly. So it's really
Mhm.
important to make sure you're mitigating that at the highest possible level. I mean, you got to be
Mhm.
extra good, right?
So, Seth, you're talking about that. You're going to lose some productivity.
Yep.
Could you even get ahead of things by telling all of your project managers that you're going to do 2 days of project management training across the company? And so you're planning, 6 weeks in advance. Everyone has their calendars free. They've got no client deadlines those 2 days. They don't have meetings scheduled. And then,
I think it'd be a great idea.
right now they've got an
Yeah.
hour at 9 o'clock in the morning on day one where the news breaks. You can send them back to their cubes to, like, breathe for an hour, and then, hey, by lunchtime we want to start a comms plan out to our clients, and now they're not feeling just overwhelmed because I've got meetings, I've got deadlines, I have all this other stuff. So you can, use a
Right.
ruse, if you will, to clear their calendars in advance. And, now it's not emotion and anxiety about workflow because we built in some buffer for
Yeah.
them.
Because it's hard to drop news like this and say, jump back and pretend like nothing's changed at all,
Right,
in the meeting that you've got scheduled in
right.
10 minutes.
Yep. And if that leaves them scrambling or not thinking clearly while they're doing calculations, the risk of errors and omissions, and then, client's first impression is, stuff went sideways once the acquisition happened,
Yeah.
you know. So there are ways we could certainly, anticipate that and, put some plans around it. Not saying that particular idea is a good one, but those are the kinds of ideas we should be thinking of is all right, so we can anticipate it's going to be a lot more work than people anticipate. So how do we free up time to where they're not dealing with the double whammy of now they're behind and emotional?
Right.
But cool. Well, Marty, looks like you're in the same swim lane here. What did you decide to work on?
Um, yeah, just that employee experience and how important it is for the buyer to stay connected to the survey data and how the employee is feeling. I mentioned receiving historic EX survey data, if there's any benchmarking for that buyer to be aware of. But then really staying on that pulse, but not just with the survey, but as you said, Ryan, when your company was sold, you were small enough to be able to talk to each person one on one. And if that's an option in any form, that seems very, very good, rather than an email communication or on top of or in addition to. But it also made me think, Ryan, when we were in the session around the hiring and recruiting CX in that circumstance, we talked about, sort of the who does that in those moments. And I was wondering, is there even, it seems the benchmark is just to make sure people don't freak out. Like that's the
Right,
benchmark. There doesn't seem to be any discussion of what's above that. What would be
right.
a magic moment where your client or your employee would say, who does that? And I don't know. I don't know if you have any experience with that, but it seems like we're just aiming for
Don't suck.
okayedness.
Yeah. So I love that perspective. Everyone is focused on mitigating damage and let's just not make this suck. Good CX leaders are going to look at this moment and say, how can we introduce a moment of delight, and that leads to anticipation and optimism. So, with Seth, we talked about a lot of things of mitigating the bad. Let's ideate here for a minute. What are some things we could do in that moment that really create some delight and anticipation?
One thing that you said earlier, and I don't know if this is what you have in mind, but because there's this new, you know, organization that has these different sort of strengths and values across for the client, for the partners, for the employees, like it, talking about what those opportunities are more like this is coming, or not too much, but just kind of giving them something to get excited about. Like, if you're talking to a client and you say, you had mentioned that this was something that an area you wanted to grow with this new merger that we are going to be able to do something more along those lines to align with your needs. And so understanding what they've said and aligning that with this new offering or value or whatever. And even if it means like people, like, saying that now we have, and Ryan, you did that, like we have this whole new group of people that are focused on the tool and the things that they can do. And, so I think I'm thinking about my own experience too, is like that was exciting. It's like, oh my gosh, that's great. We're going to be able to build out, maybe some implementation, integration with other systems and things like that. So whatever it is, I mean,
Yeah.
to be determined by the feedback from the client.
Yeah. So definitely some positioning, some messaging there. Anything else we could do? Anything we could give? Anything we could bring? What are some things that would be a surprise and yet meaningful for our employees the day of an announcement? Don't think constrained, right? I think what if?
A pay increase.
Pay increase? Yeah, right. We've
Extra
already
PTO.
negotiated,
Yeah.
we've already negotiated a pay raise for everybody, right? Cool. What was that with a PTO, Marnie? Give everyone a mental health day in the next 2 weeks, you know? Sometime in the next 2 weeks, you have to take a day off and just, think about it. Think about what your new career is going to look like. Here's a career package to help you, think through what your future in the new organization might be. Who does that, right, Marnie? What else could we do? See, that's what the CX leaders have to do. That's what you guys have to do. When you're facilitating a conversation like this, keep asking, what else could we do? Let the insane ideas end up on the wall too. That's fine. It'll make some of the only partially insane ones seem more palatable, right?
I mean, you can certainly send things to all the clients you're acquiring. Um, Whether it's, I don't know, something for their desk or bottle of wine, welcome to the family.
Yep. Could you give out everyone's partially earned Christmas bonus early? If it's May, give them 5/12 of their expected bonus for the year. That kind of stuff can really go a long way too. You think about the emotion, all the people who had something done to them, they might have a little bit of resentment for all the people that got money, right? So seeing some of that shared around sends a message. And it might mean the sellers have to not take quite as much into their own pocket because they're sharing some of it with the people around them, right? But then it becomes a recognition of you helped put me here, and so I'm going to share some of that with you. A lot easier to go home and tell your spouse that we just got acquired when you're bringing home a check that's, going to make the spouse. I think about putting the spouse on the buyer side. All right. So instead of going home and complaining about it and, with your spouse, you're kind of going into a cycle of uncertainty and anxiety. The spouse is like, hey, I mean, $2,500 is $2,500. We can go take that summer vacation now that we were talking about. So, all right. Katie, how about you? What'd you put together?
Yeah, so I worked on the client side of things, specifically like the preparation stage. Um, so I think, first step is analyzing potential client fears and uncertainty. how are they going to react? What are their first thoughts are going to be? Like, are they worried about the level of service changing? Are they worried about price changing? Are they worried they might not be working with their point of contact who they've worked with the past 10 years? So kind of just gathering all that information just to know how to move forward. Um, Identifying risks, the main is going to be obviously losing clients and how to mitigate them. How can we reduce the amount of lost clients when we do inevitably lose clients? How can we kind of offset that? So kind of just planning for that. Communication plan, I think, is going to be like the most important thing. So drafting a communication plan, I think that kind of three things should happen at once. I think we would, plan to send a mass communication to all emails on the day it happens, because oftentimes this is going to get reported in some news outlet anyway. I think that there should be kind of an immediate follow-up with a relationship manager or project manager, whatever you want to call them, to kind of have that more personalized touch, just to kind of establish what's going to happen, make sure that they understand, they can ask questions. I think establishing a help desk would be helpful as well, just some 24/7 help desk for maybe like the first 3 months, where it just has kind of that constant access because they might have questions like about like a new technology. So just kind of all that stuff.
That's a
And
really
then
cool
just,
idea.
yeah, yeah, just kind of help. And I think, yeah, I think it just could help ease some stress a little bit. And then within all that, kind of the change management, including like with the communicating, is making sure they understand if there's contact changes, technology changes is always like the worst part, um, for anybody. So just kind of need to be communicating about that. And then just having surveys ready to go to send to clients during kind of like that transition assimilation period, just to see what's going well, what's not going well. And yeah, just kind of maybe over survey a little bit in those initial months just to see how things are going and how we can correct any issues that aren't working out.
It's really hard. I said it earlier, I'll say it again. It's really hard to have survey fatigue when there's a lot of stuff changing and people have stuff to
Hmm.
say.
Yep.
Right? Your permission to survey more often goes through the roof when there's something big happening.
Yep.
Any feedback for the plan here? Anything you would extend or add to it?
I just want to say I really like what you said about having like the person who has the relationship with the client being in touch with them. I think that's so key because it's like that's huge, when something is changing and the person, you're just like hearing it from the person directly. It can make such a difference in terms of, the fear and the anxiety, the uncertainty and all of that could be there, and having that personal connection, I think is very helpful. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, and it might not be necessary for every single client. I think it really depends on like how often you're in touch with them. Like, it's like I've had a doctor change, but I only saw them maybe like once in the past year. So like it's like maybe I don't care as much. But if
Yeah.
if it's, or I'm accounting, and so it's like when we have like we're helping their business decisions, it's a little bit more intense. So yeah, just kind of assuring them that everything is going to be okay, I just think is very important. And just like kind of going back to the employee aspect of it, when they first announced like that we were going to get merged, or acquired, I don't think they handled it well at all. So just like viewing it from that perspective of what as well, I think a lot more thought could have gone into how they did that. So yeah, reassurance is a big key.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or feedback?
And I think some of it depends on obviously who you're merging with. In our case, we didn't have a lot of footprint overlap. So we were really kind of a new, the name we were coming to them with, they hadn't heard, they weren't a competitor in the markets that we were in. So that was a different conversation than if it was someone that we were an active competitor with that, for instance, they had specifically not chosen or whatever else. So I think you have to really understand how that fits in.
Yeah. I think Katie was the only one of our clients that specifically chose us instead of clearly rated. So I remember that being a little bit of a interesting conversation.
Yep.
Yeah. Otherwise, clearly rated was not in any of the markets zero
Yeah.
footprint in AEC, but we did compete with them in accounting. So they had a lot
And I'll
more
say not
attention.
having a footprint, I mean, it's easy, right? I mean, you're educating them on who this new entity is, but it's a lot
Right.
easier to say, well, nothing's really going to change from your viewpoint because, it's
Mhm.
still going to be us working with you. It's all the same people on the team. That was pretty easy. If it had been someone that was one of our competitors locally that, I'm not saying we've said bad things about them, but we've competed against them and explained why we're better than them. It becomes a more complicated discussion, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a third party consultant that we partner with, and boy, that partner talked very poorly about clearly rated. So I'm going through due diligence, knowing I'm getting ready to sell while working with the partner who's sharing some very negative sentiment about the company we're about to become. That was a really delicate one to try to navigate and weave through, and because of course we started that relationship before we were selling to clearly rated, so it was easy to commiserate with them on the front end. It's like, yeah, they are jokers. I mean, you know. So it's interesting when you start thinking through when you're being acquired by a competitor, you may have spent years or decades competing against them and building positioning of we're not that.
Right.
And then having to now, you that was one of those things I wrestled with a whole lot the first couple of weeks as I was deciding. It's like, man, I've spent years competing against them and saying we're not that, and now we're going to become that. So, like, how do you reconcile that? And there's a lot of ego that has to die in that moment, right? But, um, yeah, yeah. So those are certainly interesting things to think through in the marketplace. Jennifer, why don't you bring us home?
Okay, well, I focused on the buyer, as you can see, and really focused on what we do before, as the buyer, before announcing and to prepare for that. And some of you have touched on different elements of that, so I don't want to repeat it, but I think and Katie, you just mentioned this, like we all have mentioned it, but we bring our own experience. So when we've been acquired, or well, mostly in my case, it's like when we've acquired and what has worked and what hasn't worked well, and even our experience with just change management. And so, but bringing together people from both organizations who already, they're like need to know, and then discussing what the cultures are within the organizations and how what are the differences and everything, and then really importantly looking at the customer and employee feedback, and so what's valued within, by our customers for each of the organizations, and then what are the, if we have it, the employee feedback, to capitalize on what's working well, but also be very aware of what some of the risks are, and then, from that, develop a very structured communication plan. And you've all mentioned that, like different things about that. So being, an audience timing format, like where is this going to be in a physical room? And then there's going to be people on video, and is it going to be, and then is something going out on the web? And is there going to be a page? And I love Katie, I think it was you mentioned, like, having a place for people to go, like a helpline or an information session, like day after tomorrow, there's going to be on Fridays, if you have questions about what's happening. We're going to have a session. Anybody can come in. Like I love that. And so, but with that, talking points for that, and I think, Seth, you mentioned like consistency builds trust. So having that consistent messaging, that unified approach, that, messaging that can really, focus on sort of like the goals that you want about, building excitement, reducing as much as you can the fear and uncertainty that a lot of people are feeling. And very importantly, like what's next? And I loved when you said earlier, Ryan, like giving staff something that they can do on day one, like what to expect on day one. Like, oh, I need to use this code for my timesheet or whatever. It could be very simple, but it's something that gives people something tangible that they know that they can contribute to and that they're a part of. They're a part of this new organization, even if it's small. So I really like that. So I've kind of brought a lot of ideas that I've heard already. Um, and then, I think this again is coming from, um, well, the last sentence anyway, the value, highlighting the value and the strengths that everyone has already acknowledged. I think that's so important. And, it's having been through a change in an organization where something has been built and then someone else comes in and they just throw it away and they just toss it to the side. And the people who built that feel like crap because there's no acknowledgement of the value. And so, again, I think it's important to, acknowledging the collective value and highlighting the value that everyone is bringing together, but also the humility of saying that we're in a learning process. We've been learning for these months, but we're going to continue to learn. So it's like being grounded in reality and not like, putting a bow on it, but just say, yeah, this is big. This is a change, but it's not going to be perfect. And I really appreciate that whenever I've been through a change is that like there is this acknowledgement, this reality that people aren't trying to gloss over. Like that, yeah, there's going to be some bumps in the road and that's expected. Like that to me is very reassuring because it's not the executives acting like everything's just going to be perfect. And so, and that, that kind of messaging can go into all the different stakeholders that we have here, the employees, the clients, the partners, and then, both organizations. So that's it.
Right. Any thoughts or feedback for Jennifer? Two practical examples from my own lived experience that I thought clearly rated did really well in acquiring us was right away they set up best of the best meetings.
Mm.
So we had a small handful of clients that had, either left Client Savvy and went to Clearly Rated or left Clearly Rated and came to Client Savvy. So they set up a client panel of best of the best and had the small handful of clients that had been customers of both come together and what did you like best about Client Savvy? What did you like best about Clearly Rated? But we did that internally as well. So the two client success teams would come together and here's what we think we do best and here's what we think we do best. And so it really kind of started that we're going to work towards being one team together. And it was a bringing together of peers rather than um, you know, setting a us versus them. So we were two teams, and each team's, sharing the pride of what they think they do well. It was all about I want to learn from you, and you want to learn from me. So that's what pulled us together. We integrated in 4 months. I mean, that's like record speed. It was a 12-month original plan, and we did it in four. So the other thing I thought was really strong, and Jennifer, you talked about the day one task. The first system they gave us access to was their internal intranet type thing, right? so we use a Confluence and Jira as a tech company. That's what we use, right? So a Confluence is like the holder of all the truth. So all the employee docs and all that nonsense were there, but our task was there is a page and there's a sub page for every employee and it's your employee bio. And there's like a little, format, but you put your picture and, some hobbies and a few other things. So day one, all of us had to go fill out our, intranet bio page. Well, while I'm there, you know what I'm doing? I'm reading a bunch of other people's bio pages, and it was just this like neat way to, I figured I'd go spend 5 minutes and update mine, and I end up, 9 o'clock at night. I'm spending, 2 hours reading about all my new colleagues, you know? So that was a really thoughtful thing that they did that helped one make me feel like I accomplished something. Two, it got me in their systems, and it, made me start feeling like I was plugging in. Any other ideas for, for how, as a buyer, you can do some of those things?
If it hadn't occurred to me until you both, listening to both of you about getting teams together, get PMs and PMs together, get sales and sales together, and have like an intentional facilitation that makes it light and gets people talking because they probably won't start out talking, but there are fun ways to make that happen and to break some ice and to sort of humanize
Yeah.
the big bad buyer.
Yep. I one of the firms that we work with, they did an acquisition and they did an exchange program. So during the first 6 months, it wasn't required, but every employee on both sides was given an opportunity to sign up for a week to work in the other company's office. And the company paid for airfare, hotel, whatever it was. And not, most didn't take it up, but enough did. Some of them was, oh, I get to go travel to, so and so and kind of have a week away. That sounds fun. And they, worked in the other office, but that led to some of those, friendships and connections starting to get built. And of course, the brave extroverts went first, right? They were the first ones to sign up. And as, the introverts start seeing that it works, more and more of them signed up. So it was an expense. You had to pay for some airfare and hotels and all that. But compared to the expense of losing people, the ROI can be pretty strong. So that was kind of a neat one. Any other ideas for that, pulling teams together that Jennifer was talking about? All right.
Brian, one
Well,
question I had
yeah.
really quickly is like, just from a CX perspective in particular is, and you mentioned it, several of you mentioned it, but ensuring a consistent customer experience or a consistent employee experience, like how to, and I know we've talked about that, but I think that's a challenge. It can be a challenge depending on what's changing and sort of how to like evaluate that, like what is your baseline and then where are you going and how do you make sure that you're making changes that are going to positively influence the customer experience, so you're not doing something that they don't want or that's going to be disruptive. And I just think I'm not saying you have to answer that, but I think that's
Right.
hard, especially with the unknowns that are, uncertainty sometimes that's in those kind of an M&A.
Yeah. We did a lot of client interviews. Our CEO talked to a 10 or so of our clients the first month after acquisition personally, just to get to know them, learn what matters to them. That was, reassuring for a lot of our clients that all of a sudden the CEO of the acquiring company, cares enough about me to talk to me. We did a couple of client panels. Um, so yeah, yeah, a lot of things like that can give the buyer the voice they need for clients to say, don't mess with this, you know? Like we heard a lot of "Don't take Ryan Nelson away from me." But those of you who work with Ryan Nelson, you probably would share that sentiment, right? So, well, guys, thanks for sticking through this. I try not to do these on Fridays, just the way the calendar works. This is when we can get it in. What are your key takeaways and big ideas, having now looked at mergers and acquisitions through the lens of CX? Marnie, let me start with you. What were your big takeaways?
I 0 to 100 again in your session, Ryan. I didn't know where CX and EX fit in. I think of mergers and acquisitions as just about numbers and a few people at the top pulling all the strings, and that there's not much to do underneath the hood. But I see that there's really, really, really a lot.
Yeah. Seth, how about you?
Yeah, so I'd say it's a huge moment of truth for clients and employees, because you're doing something that affects them. You're making a promise of how it's going to affect them, and you really have to deliver on that. And it said it doesn't happen accidentally. It's a
Right.
lot of work and focus and planning to try to be successful with it, because there's a lot of places it can go wrong. So treating it like the level of a moment of truth that it is huge. Because you're right. I understand why employees leave. I understand why clients leave, and it's not because they've changed. It's because you changed. Right? You
Right.
did something negative. So you really got to try to mitigate that in every way possible.
Yeah. I know Ardura is not done scaling through
No.
acquisition. Is this going to change how you guys go about it in the future?
Like I said, it already, well, I mean, we've already done some of these things, and
Right.
I think I talked about it in part because we saw what were pain points for us as we went through it. So, as
Hmm.
we've tried to integrate some other firms that we've effectively acquired under us since we've been here now in our own region and under our leadership, it's like, okay, well, we're going to do it better, right? We're going to try
Right.
to, fill in some of these gaps. But I definitely got some additional ideas today of how to do it and maybe how to prepare for the moment in
Right.
advance in some ways we didn't. Again, we know
Yeah.
there was lots of things that could have been done better when we came in, and so we're just trying to make it better for everybody else.
Yeah. It really is hard because having gone through due diligence on the seller side, it is both a sprint and a marathon. You're sprinting for the length of a marathon going through due
Yeah,
diligence. There's just no time for any of this stuff. So it's really hard to step aside, prioritize it, allocate the resources to it when you're just trying to get to the closing table, and all of a sudden the lawyers need 17 more documents, and
right.
you know, no one knows where
And in
they're
our
sitting.
case, it was also the fact that there were so many different people that were in different spots. So you talk about day one. I mean, we had people that had been, basically have known and been there for 6 months. We had people that had known for 6 weeks, and we had people known for 6 minutes, right?
Yeah.
All coming together at that one moment. And it's a very different experience for each of those groups of people. And trying to get them all to the same spot. Yeah,
Yeah.
it took months and months and months and months.
Yeah. I know.
I, I told some of the other management at the time, I was like, the best thing we can do is over communicate and reiterate and reemphasize. And if you think you've said things too many times, say them a few more,
Twice
right?
as
Because
much. Yep.
twice as much, right? Just keep talking, and because sometimes they just need to hear it over and over and over again. And we need to remind ourselves over and over again of what we're telling people and make sure we're living up to it.
Sure. Jennifer, how about you?
Well, ditto to what Marnie and Seth already said, but I think what stands out is sort of the personal part of it, like, acknowledging the people part of it, and that, people's style of, introvert, extrovert, how long they've been known about something, really acknowledging that aspect. I think it relates to both CX and EX so much. And again, what Marnie said about like there's so much. I guess the big thing is there's so much that you can do, and having that perspective of CX and EX is so helpful. I see this, and I also didn't know what to expect. I was like, well, I'm not going through an M&A, and I don't know, but I've experienced it from the as
Right.
the buyer, like I was distant from it. But anyway, it's just, it gives me an entirely new perspective, not just for this, but for any change that organizations are going through.
Right.
Like that lens of keeping the person and their experience and being consistent, and and acknowledging the people who are delivering the messages. They're having their own experience, all of it. It's like all different levels. So
Yeah.
it's very helpful. Thank you.
Right. Katie, final words for you.
Yeah. First, I just thought the statistics were fascinating. It's about like expected client churn. But yeah, I was almost on the side of being acquired, and I've been on the side of acquiring. And I just wish that our management team went through more of a workshop like this. I think there could be a lot of lessons to learn just because, again, that when we were about to be acquired, I don't think they handled that well at all. And then we've had some issues also with acquiring firms. We acquired a firm in Nogales about 3 or 4 years ago now. And one of the things that I don't think really was considered at the top is just how much of a different market it was. Because, like, they are close to us, but that is like a very rural area. And so we priced out most of their clients almost immediately. And so it was still worth it because we needed the bodies and the expertise, because that's one of the biggest issues with the accounting industry right now is we're anticipating a 70% retirement rate in 10 years. And so yeah. But I just like all the breakdown. I think it's extremely helpful to kind of do it at a
Yeah.
granular level.
Right. And ultimately, what I'm hoping you guys are learning, and I seem to be hearing this from you, is the macro idea. And Jennifer, I think you said it really well. Anytime there's change, there's going to be impacts to experiences for clients, employees, partners. So as you're navigating your own organizations and stuff is happening, just constantly be hyper vigilant of that empathy piece of what are we doing to people and how do we communicate it? How do we manage it? How do we design it in such a way to make sure the changes we're doing are creating more than the outcome we're hoping for? Right? That should be the aspiration. Let's create more than the outcome we're hoping for. And when CX leaders are participating in that, that's when your role completely changes and your ability to capture resources to go do fun projects is elevated. So, well, guys, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a beautiful weekend, and we'll see you guys next month. I don't even remember what next month's topic is. I think it's activating promoters. Where is it on the calendar?
The 16th, Monday, I think. Is that right?
Are we doing a Monday? That's weird.
Um,
Monday, yeah, creating a CX
Creating a
charter.
CX charter.
Yeah. All right. Look at you being more on top of my own schedule than I
No,
am. So thank you.
I had looked at it. I had looked at it earlier because I reflected that it was the same day, like of the month. That's all.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. We'll see you guys next time for creating a CX charter.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
buddy.
Thank you
All right.
Thanks,
all.
Ryan.
This
Have
was
a great
great.
Bye.
weekend.
Have a
Bye.
great weekend. Bye.